Hello, welcome again to yet another continuation of our lecture series on OSS 121, Introduction to Sociology. My name is Dr. Fawzia Mohammed. In this lecture, by the end of this lecture, you're expected to understand or to define socialization, including agents of socialization, to understand social organization and the importance within this social structure, as well as to appreciate the processes of social change. So maybe we should begin by defining what socialization is. What is socialization, you may ask? Socialization is a process whereby individuals acquire knowledge, they acquire language and skills, they acquire norms and values that conform to the roles that are required for the integration into a group or a community. At birth, children do not have a culture. It is transferred to them by their parents, by their teachers, by their peers, through the process known as socialization. You may ask yourself, how do parents transfer culture to the children, for example? Let's take a small example. When a child is born, what does the culture say? In some cultures, when it is a baby boy that is born, there are certain actions, rituals that undertake or conform with the birth of a child who is a boy as compared to a child who is a girl. For instance, within the Islamic culture, when a child is born who is a boy, the ritual is to slaughter 2 goats. Yet, when it is a child who is a girl who is born, the ritual is to slaughter 1 goat. And the same differences or issues can be seen within other cultures. For example, when we look at the Western tradition, when a child is born, they will be taken into a nursery that is essentially pink in color, and this child will be given things that attain or conform to the pink color, such that when somebody sees pink, they associate pink with a girl. Yet when it is a boy who is born within the same culture, you'll have the boy will be given blue color, and most of the things within either the nursery or even the toys that they will be made to play with, they will conform to the blue color. Or when we talk about maybe the roles that are expected of them, once a child starts to grow and play with toys, a girl will be given dolls to play with. This is in preparation or introducing this girl to the role that one day they will become a sister, they will become a mother, so they need to start preparing for this role. Hence, they are given dolls. Whereby, in contrast, a boy will be given trucks or even guns or even airplanes to play with. This is all in preparation to the roles that they're expected to perform within the community as they grow up. During socialization, people learn language of the culture they are born into, as well as the roles they are expected to play in life. For example, I just gave examples of the differences between a girl and a boy child. People also learn and adapt cultures, norms through socialization. Norms are the conceptions of appropriate and expected behavior that are held by most members of that society. Socialization is a lifelong process. We learn social expectations and how to interact with others, and the behavior that is considered to be human nature is actually learned through socialization. For example, as a child, one will be socialized to see that when you see an elder person, you have to go to them, you have to greet them. Or if it is in a public means of transport, then if you are sat in a seat in a bus, if you see an elderly person, culture and norms dictate that you have to stand up and to let this older person take the seat, and so on and so forth. Or even when people are sick, there are certain norms that tell you how to behave and to act act around sick people as compared to when they are not. So all these are norms that govern behavior and what is expected among members of a society given a particular setting. During socialization, people learn how to walk, for example, to talk, and even to eat, and some of the behavioral norms that help people to fit into the society. Oftentimes we've had children being told, no, you cannot eat with your left hand, because that is trying to socialize this child on how people eat. People eat using their right hands, for example. Or sometimes when you're eating, people would say, make sure you close your mouth, don't eat with your mouth open, don't make a sound when you're chewing, and all these small things that sometimes people don't, people do and tell kids without thinking that what they're doing is socialization, but actually what they're doing is socializing this child so that they can grow into towards fitting into a human society where this is how things are done, and that is an acceptable way of mannerism and of doing things. Now, socialization has various agents. Some are major and therefore called primary, and then there are also those that are called secondary agents of socialization. For example, the four major agents of socialization include the family, because this is the first contact that the person or the child gets to know of the world and what is expected of them and what their roles are and what to do and what not to do. And then secondly, as the child grows, they'll go and they'll be enrolled into a school, and this is the other major agent of socialization, which will also continue to teach this child maybe how to behave when you are confronted with people who are of the similar age, sharing similar characteristics and so on. But also the child will be exposed to the community, and within the community there will be different groupings, and then the community will further socialize this person into what the community expects of them, and vice versa, and also some peers or friends. These also act as important agents, primary agents of socialization, or socializing somebody to be the acceptable human being that society recognizes, agrees with, and likes and prefers, as compared to somebody who has not been socialized to accept and to adhere to certain ways and mannerisms as are considered acceptable by a particular society or community. The other agents of socialization include the mass media, gender, and sometimes even the workplace. And these are referred to as the secondary agents of socialization. Now, what is the difference between the primary agents and the secondary agents? The primary agents are said to be primary because these are the ones that are closest to an individual and the ones that are first contact with this individual towards telling and informing and teaching this individual how to be an acceptable member of a community or a society. Whereas the secondary agents, these are the ones or the institutions that help an individual to find his place within the society. And these sometimes may include things like religious institutions, say churches and mosques, even schools, as well as workplaces. We see, for example, schools helping children in improving social skills. For example, one is an only child within the family setting. So this child may not know sometimes how to behave appropriately within a social setting whereby there are many people. But once this child is enrolled in school, then they will start to learn how to behave within a social setting whereby there are other children. Then they'll improve their skills of doing things together, sharing, and being part of a larger community as compared maybe to the family that has limited number of people. Now let's give a closer look at some of these agents of socialization, beginning with the family. The family includes parents, siblings, and sometimes members of the extended family. And all of these people or all these entities teach the child what it needs to know. For example, they will teach the child the language, how to dress, what is expected, how to eat, what time to sleep, what time to go out to play, and all these things that are required in order for this child to be able to grow and to fit in to the society or community that they are born into. Families do not socialize children in a vacuum, however. Social factors affect how they raise their child. For example, years ago, say in the 70s and in the 60s, beating up a child or giving a child tasks to do was considered a normal way of them, a socialization process, because they were teaching this child towards certain roles and expectations. However, now there are certain activities that children are not supposed to do or are not allowed to do because it is considered that it is child labor. You cannot, for example, tell children to do certain aspects of things because that is considered in nowadays circumstances to be child labor, for example. Peer groups is another agent of socialization. Now, peer groups are just people of similar age and social status, and they also share similar interests. Peer groups are particularly important, for example, for teenagers, because as they grow, they start to develop their own identities that are separate from their families. And peer groups can work in both advantageous or disadvantageous to this teenager. We have seen cases whereby peer groups have helped to shape individual or this teenager who maybe was lazy within their home setting, did not want to do anything, but due to access and being associated with people, members of his peers, then this particular teenager will become active and a contributing member to the family. However, peer groups can also work in a negative perspective, whereby sometimes a teenager who would otherwise be doing everything according to the norm of what is expected would learn some mannerisms that are not frowned upon and not considered good within the society from the peers. For example, taking of drugs among our teenagers, for example. These are things that sometimes teenagers learn from their peers, and when they accept and take up these issues, then they become deviant members of the society, so to speak. Schools is another agent of socialization, where children spend a long time of the day being socialized. And in schools, individuals would learn how to work within a teamwork setting. They'd learn how to follow the schedule. Remember, in a school, there's a timetable of what happens from the morning until the time when the kids or the children are allowed to go home. They have to follow a schedule, and a school is the best place to teach this child that in life you have to have a structure, you have to follow a schedule in one way or another in certain types of settings. They are also taught maybe how to use things like textbooks, and sometimes certain teachers have certain rituals that teachers being their role models and being the leaders within the school setting, children tend to learn some of these ideals or roles that they can learn from their teachers. And some of this learning that happens in schools is described as the hidden curriculum by some sociologists. Religion is another agent of socialization, and religion influences issues of morality and a sense of right and wrong. Influences of religion extends to many areas of our lives. For example, the religious ceremonies, they teach people about beliefs, about the dress code, about the mannerisms, and so on and so forth. The mass media is also another agent of socialization. Mass media includes the distribution of impersonal information via television, radio, newspapers, and even in the internet. Social media is one such instrument of mass media that is very, very commonly used in nowadays in social interaction. And the mass media influences the social norm, particularly of political, religious, and sometimes even the public opinion of social views that are considered acceptable and appropriate, or vice versa. Now let us focus and shift our attention to the concept of social organizations. Social organizations refer to patterns of social interaction within organizations. The patterns that characterize social organizations have developed over time. And these social organizations can be looked at from the smallest or minute number of organizations onto the world large systems. For example, dyads are considered to be the smallest level of social organizations, and most of the time dyads consist of maybe simply just 2 people. Then the next follows the small groups, and then these small groups are followed by formal organizations such as schools, churches, institutions. And these are followed by communities. We know that communities are larger communities. For example, we say that the Tanzanian community involves or includes more than 120 ethnic groupings. And then we have the nation states. For example, the East African community. This is a social organization of nation states, which includes 5 country members, including Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi. And finally, we have these wide, large systems called the world systems. And the world systems are large entities of social organizations. For example, the United Nations is one such social organization. Groups are among the most stable and enduring of social units. Groups form the foundation on which societies rests. Family, a village, a political party, a trade union are all examples of social groups. Primary groups consist of intimately interaction and cooperation over a long period of time, for example, of families and friends, peers, neighbors, classmates, and even church members, so to speak. These groups are marked by informal communication. The members have strong emotional ties and attachment with each other, and they also relate to one another as a whole, and also as well as unique individuals. So these are the primary groups. Now let us focus our attention towards some of the characteristics of what is considered or termed as a primary group. A primary group has 5 characteristics. First, it involves face-to-face interaction. Secondly, the interaction is unspecialized, existing due to a wide range of personal needs. The third characteristic is that it bonds the bonds that are found within primary groups are relatively permanent. The fourth characteristic is that some of these primary groups are small in size. And fifth and final, they are intimate, characterized by a sense of we have said, our community did this, our community expects this, our community has informed us about this. And they also have an emotional commitment to the whole rather than the individual members. And the well-being of the group is the goal for all members within this group. For example, the family, the well-being of the family is to have the family work as a unit, as a cohesive unit, not as a fragmented unit. Second, we have the secondary groups. Secondary groups are those where individuals do not necessarily interact much and the members have less personal and emotional attachment as compared to the members in primary groups. In secondary groups, communication is of a much more formal nature as compared to the informal communication that is found within primary groups. In secondary groups, members relate to one another only in particular roles and for practical reasons. For example, a stockbroker and her clients, they only relate because of business. Other than business, they do not have much of a relationship. So such a relationship would tend to be formal, whereby they would just talk about business, and outside the confines of business, they would not have much to talk about because they don't have much in common. Secondary groups are also common in large industrial societies, and it has been said that such secondary groups result in loneliness and sometimes isolation of members of such secondary groups, and hence this could also be explained as one of the reasons why you find, for example, in the Western Hemisphere, people need to go to single sites to look for spouses or to look for partners or friends, and they also need dating services in order to make them get the significant other, for example, or sometimes they need to go to church groupings or communes as platforms where they can try and build these primary relationships or friendships that are significantly missing within secondary groupings. Those were the characteristics of primary groupings. Now let us focus on the characteristics of secondary groupings. There are 6 characteristics of secondary groupings. First is that secondary groupings are more impersonal, as we have already stated. They are more specialized, that is, they are goal-oriented, whereby you have classes or you have different jobs and different tasks whereby people just relate with each other because of certain needs that are really of an impersonal nature. And in some cases, secondary groupings are temporary. Once they join because of a particular certain task or activity, and once the activity is done, then they tend to fall apart because they don't have much holding them together once the goal has been attained. Fourth is that they are usually larger as compared to the primary groups that were smaller. Fifth, they require less of an emotional commitment. Remember, we said most of the commitments here are impersonal and business-like. And sixth and finally, they also tend to be of an informal nature. Now, we did look at some of the primary and the secondary groupings. Now let us look at the general characteristics of groups. Generally, a group consists of people who interact and form social patterns. The second characteristics of groups is that they increase in size equals to loss of freedom. The smaller the group, the more the freedom, the more they can be emotionally and committed and, there for each other. But once they start to become larger, then some of these issues tend to decrease, because now within a larger group there has to be loss of freedom. For example, we saw that even in larger groups there's a sort of partial relationship. Third is that the interaction reaffirms the social patterns. Now, interaction is more possible within smaller informal groups as compared to larger groups where people are busy, they don't necessarily get time to meet on a frequent basis as compared to small informal groups. And then fourth, groups contribute to larger organizations. The bigger the group, they also contribute to these larger organizations in a way that someone can be a member of different groupings within the larger organizations. And also groups define reality for the individual. What is seen or understood as reality sometimes can be defined according to the group or groups that one is a member of. If we remember and we take our thoughts back to when we were discussing issues to do with Emma Durkheim, and remember he divided society between mechanical and organic solidarity, and those are essentially social groupings. And some of the things or the issues or the characteristics that he associated with either the mechanical or the organic groupings were issues like, for example, he said in the mechanical solidarity, the characteristics of these groups were that they were of a rural community nature, and then they also had intimate relations, and they also did or they conducted similar tasks, in which case talking about farming activities, and then they also lived in a sort of one territorial area where it was easy to know each other because they were living there for a long period of time. They knew each other well, and they had these intimate relations between communities, one community and another. On the other flip of the coin, his organic solidarity or social organization included characteristics like of a more urban nature, because now people are moving from the rural to the urban settings, and with that came the impersonal relationships that we were talking about. We remember when it is a larger group, it is a bit difficult to maintain the intimate personal relations. And then this was also a time when people had a lot of skilled, specialized activities and tasks to do. So people were uniting because they needed to unite in order to achieve certain goals, say in a factory or in an industry. And then also the behavior was of a more impersonal nature or circumstance because they didn't have time to make a lot of personal relations. And sometimes even their calculations were based on impersonal and public opinion because they did not develop and culture and cultivate time to know each other on a personal level. So this is how you see some of these issues that we learn in sociology bring us back and forth, go back and forth in order to really try to understand and to explain why some of these issues and characteristics are important for sociology. Now, we focus again to another aspect of our lecture today on the social structure. The social structure is said to be the interrelationship among roles, among groups, institutions, social classes, and even global economic regions. Now, what are the elements of a social structure? We are told that a social structure consists of something called status. And for status, for example, you've heard people saying that this particular individual belongs to a high social status as compared to this other individual who belongs to a lower social status. And this can be seen, for example, when we look at the Indian system, whereby there are all these castes which start from the higher to the lowest caste, and each caste holds a certain social status. And sometimes you're also told that social status can come from either inheriting a certain class, maybe the royal class, the ruling class, as compared to those who do not hold a certain powers, positions, economic status. And then another element of a social structure includes the roles that people play within this social structure, and this could be different depending on the needs and the nature of the roles that they need to play. For example, a woman would play the role of a sister, yet they can play the role of a mother, and also play the role of, say, a nurse or a teacher within their workplace. So you find that this one person has different sets of roles to play within the social structure depending on where they are and what they are doing at the same time. And then there are also another element of social structure is the groupings that are found within the social structure. Yet we also have organizations and we also have institutions. Now, with status is important for sociologists because status can either be acquired through two major ways. One, it is ascribed social status, or secondly, it could be the achieved social status. So when we say ascribed social status, we mean this is the status that is given to you by birth. For example, if you are a child of a chief, or if you are the child of a king, then you automatically become the prince or the princess, and so on and so forth. But also sometimes, so these are the ones that are given to you by right. You didn't necessarily have to do anything to acquire this. And this ascribed status, they are passed through generations to generations. And for example, again, coming back to the Indian society, this is very well visible within the caste system, whereby if you're a Brahmin, therefore you belong to this priest family, then all the children that you bear after and after will belong to that social status just because they are born into that family. On the other hand, when we look at the achieved social status, the achieved social status can be gained through personal efforts. And here, resources that people own, for example, when they have big areas of land or they control large numbers of animals, then this person will be said to be a rich person, depending on where they are. For example, in Africa, somebody who has big portions of land and they also have animals will necessarily be looked at as a rich person. So this would be a status that this person has acquired through personal gain, if this person did not get this status from birth. And sometimes even education can give somebody certain status. For example, when look at the academic higher learning institutions, whereby you find the more educational status and achievements you acquire, then the more your status changes from being maybe a TA on to becoming an assistant lecturer, onto a lecturer, senior lecturer, and finally to become a professor. And sometimes also through travel, people get certain status from their travels and things that they have done previously.
Kuli nyuma kunyeza tu sio wenda mbele sana.
Yes.
Okay, kunyeza hiyo left no hii hapo alafu scroll. Yes. Kunyeza sasa kunyeza okay hapo utakudi hapo.
Yes.
Okay, haya ni click basi.
Now let us look at roles. Roles are a set of norms and values that define the expected behavior in a social position. For example, the traditional roles within the gender issues define that a woman would be the carer of the family, taking care of the children, taking care of the other family members, and also maybe taking care of the sick. And religion also has certain roles that people play. For example, there are certain religions that don't allow women to be heads of that religious organization or institution, if you like. Or sometimes if you are a peasant, then there are certain roles that are associated with being a peasant, or even, and so on and so forth. However, roles change. Migration is affecting traditional roles in contradictory ways. For example, traditionally women were seen to be found within the home setting, whereby they would not necessarily be found out in the public arena. However, right now, because of education and because of migration and because of contact with other people, you find that women are occupying roles that were traditionally not associated with being a woman. For example, now we have women who are pilots. Before, that was a role that was somehow significantly just for men. You also have women now, engineers, and women doing so many things that were traditionally not associated with women. But also, roles can stress. Migrants feel stressed because they cannot carry out some of the traditional roles that they are used to back home. So when they come into these new territories, new environments, and new settings, sometimes they get this role stress because they are not within the new settings allowed to do the things that they traditionally would do back home. And then there's also an issue of role conflict, and this depends on the new and modern roles that demand certain things that the traditional role would not allow or cater for. So role conflict may be particularly hard on especially the youth or some of the ethnic groupings and within multicultural environments. Looking at social change can be defined as the alteration of patterns of culture, social structure, social behavior over time. Social change involves the complex interaction of the environment, technology, the culture, personality, political, and sometimes even economic and religious issues. Social change is the transformation of culture and social organization, or social structures if you like, over time. We know that society is never static. We already said society is continuously and constantly changing, and the social, political, economic, and cultural changes occur constantly. And there are certain theories, maybe classic theories, that can tell us or inform us more about the social changes, and sometimes there are also research methods that are used if you really want to understand and to know more about some of these social changes that are occurring within the society. So within sociology, the study of social change is a large body of entity where you can really learn a lot about these changes, why they occur, how they occur, and some of the issues that come with social changes, both positive, negative, or the like. The main characteristics of social change. We are told that social change happens everywhere, but the rate of the change is what varies from one place to another. For example, if we look at the changes that are happening between developed and developing countries, you'll find that, for example, right now the developing countries are talking about the effects of the fourth industrial revolution. Yet, in our developing countries, we are trying to catch up to all this development and all these changes, and we are trying to move abreast with what is already happening or has happened in the developed countries, and we find that the pace of change is really different as compared to those who own the major needs of resources. They have the technology, they have the technological know-how, and us who have to be given, or we have to learn from and to adapt some of these changes and some of this technology from those that who develop them. The second characteristic of social change is that social change is sometimes intentional, but it often happens on an unplanned basis. For example, if you look at the history of the aeroplane, the first time that the aeroplane was being made, yes, this is a change, and it was intentional. They wanted to make an airplane so that it can do certain activities, but maybe the other changes that came about because of the airplane were unforeseen and unplanned. For example, now that it has shortened travel distances from place to place, and there are planes that are very big and can carry big, large entities of moving large entities of things from one place to another. These are some of the unplanned changes that when the first person was making the airplane did not foresee some of these changes that came about because of the introduction of the airplane. Social change often generates controversy. For example, not every change is welcomed by two hands. We find some of this may be controversy, and obviously human nature, people are not very ready to move or to come out from their comfort zone. For example, the issue of homosexuality in religion. This is an issue that has brought a lot of controversy, or sometimes even homosexuality within the military and even within the society for that matter. This is still an issue that is very much contended upon. It is not something that has been that has smoothly changed the society from acceptance of people who maybe have certain practices that are seen to be different from the norm. Another main characteristic of social change is that social changes matter more. Some changes matter more than others do. For example, the invention of a personal computer has been of a more profound, has brought up with it more profound change than other changes that would have been associated within the social change process. So what causes social change? We are told there are certain few things that cause or lead to social change. One is that culture is also constantly losing and gaining certain components. And within this losing and gaining of components, there are certain things that are important to take note of. For example, the issue of inventions. Inventions produce new products, new ideas, new social patterns. The invention of the rocket propulsion, for example, led to space travel, and space travel has also opened up the possibility that in the future maybe people are thinking of going to live in other planets as compared to living on Earth. So these are some of the issues that cause or influence social change, is the issue of invention. However, even the issue of discovery can cause or lead to social change. Discovery is the finding of something that has never been found before, or finding something new in something that already exists. There's also the issue of diffusion. Diffusion is the spreading of ideas and objects to other societies. This involves trading, migration, and mass communication. Mass media has permitted the rapid diffusion of ideas, making this manifest in the private and relaxed environments of the home, where the audience are in their most susceptible, and this has allowed them to learn things that they would normally wouldn't learn, to be aware of things that normally under certain circumstances would have taken them a long time to know. So all these are the things that cause social change. The main characteristics of social change. The second cause or other reasons that cause social change include conflict. Another reason for social change happening is because of the tension and the conflict between maybe different races, between different religions, or even between different classes. If we can remember the theory of Karl Marx and his theory of class conflict is a particular example that comes in mind to see how such conflict can spark social change. And then also social change happens because of the idealistic factors. Idealistic factors include things like values, beliefs, and ideologies. From Max Weber's perspective, for example, in essence, he says that values, beliefs, and ideologies have a decisive impact on shaping the social change. These factors have shaped the direction of social change in the modern world. For example, the aspects of freedom, the aspects of self-determination, issues like nationalism and materialism, or even capitalism have influenced social change. There are certain theories that are associated with social change. Some of the several or important ones that may be important to mention at this juncture include evolutionary theory, the cyclical theory, the economic or Mandan theory of social change, obviously the conflict theory, Karl Marx, and also the technological theory. Somehow we shall not dwell into details on this social change. If you really need to learn more about the theories and what they explain in regards to social change, you can obviously go back and look at these things at the Moodle, within the Moodle platform. Now this brings us to the end of this lecture, where we discussed a lot in great detail about issues of socialization and the agents of socialization. We also talked about the social organization and some of their importance within sociology. And finally, we looked at the process of social change, including the reasons for social change, and we also reviewed or we highlighted some of the theories that are associated with social change. The next lesson, we shall discuss in detail about the social interaction and the relationship and the social institutions. Thank you for your attention.